Hey everybody, welcome to Growing with Fishes podcast. I'm Steve, and this week we have special guest Chris Trump. He was here a little bit earlier. He had to step out for a second. He will be back here in a few minutes. Fishes podcast. Sorry about that. Sorry about the looped audio there.
Every week.
I know, man. I gotta fix that. Anyways, this week I'm having issues with my headphones, so unfortunately. So, we thought we'd get started a little bit early since Chris had to step out for a minute. He will be back, and we both Marty and Fish Ganja Guy haven't been here in a little while, so we thought maybe we just touch base with them. So, how are you guys doing? What's new? We both Marty and Fish Ganja Guy. Somebody's looping. That's Marty. What's new with you, Marty?
What's new with me? Well, all kinds of crazy shit, I guess, more in my personal life. My uncle was in the hospital last week.
Oh, shit.
Had emergency surgery. They flew him in. So that was stressful, but he's doing good, in recovery now. So all that's been good. But I was like in and out of work, back and forth to the hospital. I don't even think I went in the grow room at all for like 3 days. So it was everything survived all right. Some branches got a little too heavy and sort of super cropped themselves, just fell over. And so I did this one without any net or anything like that, and I've been having a debate with one of my friends that they wouldn't have enough support, and he insisted that they would, and all this other stuff. And so he kind of talked me into it. And I did I decided, okay, I won't do anything this time. I'll just go El Natural. But sure enough, like just not standing up. Maybe if I had a bigger dual root zone or something like that, but a number of them are just falling over. So I just used fishing line and tied them up, and not a big deal. But that was about the only real damage. One of the plants fell over pretty good, I guess, from some of the weight. That was the only big issue with it. But what are you gonna do? So aside from that, that Gorilla Glue will finish up probably next week sometime. I think I'll have to check the calendar and see when they started, but they'll finish up then. My outdoor systems are all taken off, so that's been cool, getting those cleaned out and loaded up. I threw a couple tomatoes in the front porch system. And what else is out there? The raspberry that's out there is resprouted and growing again. There's a bunch of mint and different greens and stuff that's all growing out there. And then in the backyard system where I used to grow cannabis before I got shut down, I have the elderberry bush from last year survived, and it's already going nuts. We were just talking about that before we started a little bit. It's really taken off, and it's doing great. I think it's going to get huge this year, so I'm pretty excited for that. So that's in dual root zone elderberry, which I just put in last year. Even the first year gave fruit, so that was pretty cool. The grape transplant from last year, didn't get any grapes on it last year, but it survived. It's also in dual root zone in the back. What else is back there? Oh, no, the raspberry that I transplanted from the front porch. I just cut a shoot out of the root system and put it in a dual root zone pot and moved it to the back. And it survived and survived the winter, and it sprouted again, so that's good. And so that's sort of what's that. All three of my systems are operational right now. So, well, I guess I have two in the flower room, so I have one, two, three, four systems that are all running right now. And so yeah, just keeping up maintenance on those, keeping all the fish fed. Warranty going, all that good stuff. I found a bunch of grapes that we forgot in the car, so that was good to feed the worms. They were excited for that, and that's pretty much how I get most of my stuff, is all fruit scraps and things like that. So keeping the worms fed. I am making a new worm bin. I always start another one pretty much every year. Use yard clippings and stuff like that to start a new worm bin and get that going. I haven't worked on the raised beds too much, but I'll probably throw something out in the backyard. And I have a blackberry patch that I've sort of maintained hopefully get some blackberries out of that this year. So that'd be cool. Yeah, fun stuff like that.
Well, you can't kill them blackberries, so
That's right. I killed them all except for one area, so I'm trying to keep them like almost like a blackberry trellis, and I'm growing them in a big spiral like this. So we'll see how that goes. But
that'll be cool. Yeah, that'll be cool. If you can keep them under bed, if you attend to them, you could just have them going up and down and all around in one spot. Just you wouldn't have to be traipsing through that stuff. And up here, I bet that'd be a lot better than having to deal with them down on the ground where you keep getting pricked no matter what. Of course, you're going to get pricked if you mess with blackberries. Anyway.
Yeah, I had a couple of them just pop up in the middle of my raised beds, and so I was like, "Oh, okay, we'll give it a shot." We keep them out at the main yard, obviously, but a couple of them just happen to pop up. We get them on the other side of the fence, and they grow. There's basically a swamp right on the other side of the fence, so they grow all over that, and they're gonna keep spreading out. And I'm sure that's where they spread from before. But they grow nice blackberries, so we'll see how that goes. But since they popped up in the middle of the raised beds, and I can't grow anything else back there except food anyway, and I like blackberries, so.
Okay. I was going to ask you why did you want them in your raised beds, but there's nothing else there, so that's cool. Yeah.
Well, and it's just basically about maybe a 4-foot circle that I just train them in a big spiral like this, so it doesn't take up a ton of room. Last year we grew a bunch of other stuff back there, like sunflowers, and we grew like pumpkins all around them. Although the blackberry did try to eat a couple of the pumpkin plants, just sort of growing over the top of them, and they got all twisted up in each other and stuff. And the pumpkin didn't like that at all. That one didn't do so well. So it will take over some of the plants, but it wasn't too bad as long as I kept up on keeping it up in a circle and trying to figure out a place to put it. So
yeah, it's so invasive. It'll grow all over if you let it go. That's for sure.
Yeah, or if you just not do anything to it, it'll take over. So we'll see how it goes. It might get to be too much work, and I just chainsaw the motherfucker. But we'll see.
I think what it's great for is like putting up, like we live in a swamp and we don't really have fence around the back part of the property. So I've been taking all the blackberry when I chop them up and throwing them on the perimeter of the property, and they grow up into a frickin' place you don't want to walk through.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it'll keep trespassers off your property. You keep putting them on the edge of your property, and then and try to maintain them there. I find that to be a good one too.
A lot of small cannabis growers use them as some of the best fencing ever in terms of security. So
yep. I see Chris just joined us too.
Hey Chris.
Hey guys.
We're talking about blackberries.
I love blackberries.
Delicious.
Oh yeah.
Hey everybody, this is Chris Trump. I let Steve take over with his introduction now.
So this is Chris Trump. He's pretty much the current world's leading expert in Korean natural farming. He's pretty much the first person that I'm aware of to do it on a commercial scale, at least in the Western world. And he's got a lot of documentation, more than anyone else. And he's really an amazing source of knowledge. I had the pleasure of meeting him at the Science of Regenerative Organic Cannabis Conference, and I was extremely happy to be able to get him on the show. And I very much am grateful for his time and to bless us with his knowledge on the show. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. Thanks. Yeah, not probably the leading expert. The creator of natural farming is alive and well in Korea, but I'll take the U.S. Authority, or at least one of them.
All right. So why don't you tell people a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what it is that Korean natural farming is. Right now it's all the rage, and we've had incredible luck, both Marty and I, with combining it. Now we're applying it to commercial scale aquaponics systems and having incredible luck with hybridizing it along with aquaponics. And a lot of people don't even know what it is, and I'm super happy to have you on and just educate people on it.
Totally. Yeah, I was impressed in having conversations with you up there in Humboldt, California, and just the thought kind of lines of thinking that you're approaching this with. I was like, yeah, these guys are gonna figure some things out, and it's really what I was excited about is seeing that you're taking these concepts, these cues from nature, and you're saying, well, what else does nature do, or how else does it do things? And that's really in the smallest explanation, that's what natural farming is what does nature already do? You know, what's it doing? How does it grow plants well? And how can we, even if we don't totally understand it, how can we just transfer that to our commercial growing zone? Or but with that, there's a pretty very scientific and pretty elaborate method to kind of captivate what nature's already doing, or use it in a commercial setting.
So I understand you run a 800-acre farm, and you actually use these practices. Do you want to tell people about that and about your results and your findings on that? Because I was really astonished to hear about that.
Yeah, we farm macadamia nuts on the Big Island of Hawaii, and one of the kind of reasons we farm is to provide a living wage in our community. And our community's a community dealing with gentrification and other things that's kind of difficult. And so we couldn't change that. Our bottom line wasn't good on our farm, and we couldn't change what we paid people and the kind of benefits we gave. So we started looking like, okay, how do we do this better, become more profitable while not compromising things that we care about? And we found out about green natural farming, gave it a very, oh, we got the fire alarm going. It's not a fire. We gave it a very intentional and pretty skeptical. In the beginning, we were pretty skeptical. Not because we didn't believe there was something to it. We were just skeptical that it could work for an 800-acre farm. Because when I learned about Korean natural farming, the practitioners were using it was wheelbarrow size. There were some machines that people were trying to use, but that actually wasn't going to work for trees because they didn't produce fungi. So we took it and adapted it for large-scale application, and we're probably 7-8 years into using it on our farm. And all our disease trees are incurable according to our industry. It's a Phytophthora root-borne fungal disease in our industry that's called macadamia nut quick decline and macadamia nut slow decline. Basically, trees that are going to die no matter what you do. All of them recovered within 2 years, and we're back in full production by year 3. So we had incredible health develop on our trees across the entirety of the acre. Yeah, we're pretty stoked. And so we do it on everything now. We're certified organic of Hawaii State's organic acreage. And we're working on our products and just kind of developing it further. I get to speak in China in October. The International Macadamia Nut Society president was out at our farm, and he's like, yeah, this is healthier than anything I'm seeing in the world, basically, and you're doing it cheaper. And so they invited me to speak about what we accomplished. And really what it comes down to is we're just emulating how the forest grows trees. We're just taking what happens in nature as far as soil health and fostering it to happen in a commercial orchard.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So do you think that the issues that you saw get resolved. I guess not the issues that you saw, but the root issues that you guys were having before, and then introducing the different probiotic organisms and stuff, and you think fostering root health and dominating that with healthier microbiology is what led to those trees coming back? Or have you done any research or anything into what brought them back? I mean, obviously it's great. I'm just curious your thoughts on what the difference was in that. I mean, obviously I'm totally down with like biomimicry and all that stuff. I'm just curious your thoughts on what the mechanics of that effect is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Phytophthora is a worldwide problem. It's basically a very small hyphal diameter fungi that creates a relationship at the root tip and is parasitic. So instead of kind of symbiotic at the root tip, or the various technical ways to say that, the various ways that relationships are formed in the roots, Phytophthora goes up into the cambium layer and basically steals from the tree. So it's a bad deal. It pays poor rent. By bringing in natural farming, what we're doing is we're creating a highly fungal and diverse inoculum for our soil floor, our orchard floor. And by establishing these large hyphal diameter fungi that are all indigenous to the area from up in the local forests, we provide the tree with options, and the tree is smart enough to choose, to put it very simply, the fungi that pays the better rent. So it changes who it's making relationships at the root tips, and that larger hyphal diameter fungi kind of takes over that same territory, that landscape in the soil. And so the Phytophthora just gets beat out for territory. And this is, some of it's proven and some of it's just what I've kind of gone through. I sat with the head plant pathologist for the federal government in Hawaii, really nice lady, and about addressing it with another problem we're having in Hawaii, ohia. It's a rapid death with trees. And she's basically like, yeah, that makes sense, but we can't actually test that. We don't have the tools to use that, because we would have to know everything, single organism that's in an IMO culture, so that we know that we're not fostering any other diseases. And so their hands are tied to be able to use this technology to solve problems they're encountering, just because, you know, we're kind of behind in the world of academic understanding of how complex nature actually is. But yeah, for us, I believe that basically the diversity of microbes beat out the basically that disease is opportunistic, where there's a lack of other things kind of fostering balance in the soil. This kind of disease causing fungi will rise up and take over the territory and the root zone.
That makes sense. So it's being out competed, I guess, right? Like it's
Definitely
occupying all the space. It's moving into all of the apartments and paying a much better price. So there's no reason. So I like that analogy about the exchange. There's no reason for the plant to develop a relationship with it, because it has better opportunities. So
yeah, these larger hyphal diameter fungi will go 10 feet away and chew on a rock and provide the minor minerals at the root tip, and so the plant will continue to push excess carbohydrates into that zone where that fungi is making that exchange. And and then it takes care of that fungi rather than continuing to foster relationships with the Phytophthora virus.
That's great. You answered my question before I asked it, which was what was the difference between what was done with the disease plants and how, and what you did. And yeah, by, like you said, providing a carpet of culture there on the floor.
What's interesting is I've used lactobacillus ferments to treat Pythium in NFT nutrient film technology troughs for lettuce and aquaponic lettuce, and that worked amazingly well. Same thing with strawberries. Again, because of the outcompeting, you have the beneficial microbe. I recently read a white paper on using lactobacillus ferment specifically for probiotics treating for meat processing, and how they had lower incidences of pathogens when they treated it with actual live lactobacillus for instead of treating it with bleach or some kind of bacterial, treating it with a probiotic, and actually had a infinitely lower. They had not a single positive test. Whereas regular cleaners, they did not have that. They had a couple of positives. So that right there tells you that we should be switching over to probiotics, something that can keep up with these microbes rather than trying to nuke them and falling behind in the arms race.
Yeah, this goes back to a couple of doctors a couple of 100 years ago, and that divide pasture. I saw. I would love actually that study that you read, man, because we have problems we run into with washing nuts, and there's things that can bloom in the wash, and I pitched that we add LAB, and for the industry we would have to show some peer-reviewed studies that we could do that. Anyways, so later on.
It's a study from 2006. I posted it to the aquaponic Facebook group as well as the UBI Facebook group, but I'm happy to dig it up for you.
Thank you.
So why don't you give people a quick overview of what Korean natural farming is, and then maybe some of the different things that you guys make. I know that the general kind of overview is that the majority of them are fermented or some kind of process, and at some point involving fermentation. I know I learned a heck of a lot watching your Oriental herbal nutrient process, which was totally new process to me compared to all the other stuff that I had heard. So every time I check you out and what you're doing, I'm always learning, so I appreciate you. But yeah, why don't you give people a quick overview of that if you don't mind?
Yeah. So the real strength, or one of the things that I think probably the most important in natural farming, and I apologize in advance, there's some acronyms that it's like joining the military and everybody speaking a different language or something. It's rough to get started, but there's a bunch of acronyms in Korean natural farming, and it's just so you're not saying these long words like microorganism over and over and over again. But as I go through just an explanation, no, there is a YouTube. You just search my name, Chris Trump, on YouTube, and you can dig deeper into some of this. And then there's a bunch of information available online. I made the videos so that as you found all that information online and you're like, okay, I need a simple, short thing to just figure out how to do it. I made. Is
there a place that they have the entire list that translates all these acronyms?
There's several places. I'll do that on naturalfarming.co. That'll be really better done in the next couple months. I'm kind of redoing that to make it one place.
Naturalfarming.co is going to be your.
Yeah, that's not a super thriving website quite yet, but there's cgnfhawaii.com. There's naturalfarminghawaii.net. That's my friend Drake's website. But yeah, I'll be putting a bunch online too. But there's a great Facebook group that's really active. You can ask a bunch of questions there. It's just Korean Natural Farming Facebook group. I'm an admin there, so make sure you get in.
Yeah, we've had some friends that have some problems there. Sometimes.
Yeah, it's I'm kind of over Facebook in general, but no.
I hear you.
So back to the explanation. The real core, and it's hard for a lot of people, though it's actually the strongest bit in the whole thing is IMO 1 and 2. What that is, IMO stands for indigenous microorganism. Indigenous is central to most of the philosophy in natural farming, and it's philosophy mixed with really scientific thought. So just because talk philosophy and we talk Eastern thought doesn't mean it's off science. It's just the way things are communicated. But indigenous is this idea that the microbes, instead of grown in a lab, though effective. So if you buy a lab grown, like bugs in a jug, you can get all these jars of microbial supplements, and they're rad. They help you grow plants, and they, in soil, they'll have about a 6-month fall off, generally speaking. This is a very broad approximation, so I'm not saying everything will exactly, but generally speaking, they get beat out by things that are already in the soil or that thrive in that environment within 6 months. And so you get the benefit of them. They condition your soil and they'll make relationships with your plants, but they kind of fade away. You don't have that same concentration as you had when you applied it. Whereas indigenous microbes, if you get them from your local area, they love your barometric pressure, your rainfall, your temperature. And so they'll establish and self-perpetuate year after year. And you can tend that with food. And now you have a ever-growing microbial community instead of a ever-declining community that you have to constantly re-up. And so, yeah, not criticizing bugs in the jug, I think, is a very effective tool for growers, but also just recognizing that we experience great benefit from using it and a need to reapply. Whereas indigenous microbes, for me, especially with an orchard, if I can get them established and they're self-perpetuating, I have a 3-month time investment and then this kind of train that picks up speed. And I've seen this all over the world in travels, people using this, and I've definitely seen it on our farm. We went from a few worms per cubic foot to a few hundred per cubic foot in a period of 4 years, and it just now, like, you can just scratch the soil and there's tons of baby worms and everything. Gets decomposed, and my whole orchard floor on 800 acres blooms white. Like, 800 acres is a lot of territory, and we didn't pay a lot for that. We just to put into perspective, to make everything, to buy everything, and to apply it, we spend about $27 per acre per year.
That's impressive.
It's nuts. So that's below or approximately similar to commercial applications. Yeah,
that's crazy. That's why we had. I wanted to bring up, because both you and Josh are here. Cowboy, the cowboy that was at the thing.
Yeah.
You guys want to touch a little bit about that, because that guy was about as far as you get from a cannabis grower, and he was there to learn from you. And I would love to hear you guys touch on him, just to give people's perspective on how the stuff that you're working on so much with that even, and then the cannabis stuff even applies to people that are about as far removed from people that normally would think of the way that we do.
Yeah, so he's a farmer that he's a rancher, ranches cattle, and his boss is saying we're not making the money we need to on the acreage we have with the cattle we have, and so as a just choice for bottom line, he said we're cutting all fertilizer. They would constantly fertilize their kind of grow out or finish areas in their pasture land, and they cut all fertilizer. And he switched over to starting to, he learned some from Elaine Ingham and switched over to starting tending to the soil life. And he's getting increase in yields per cattle per acre, and increase in bottom line, while cutting all kinds of costs, and he has less effort and work. He doesn't have to make hay anymore. It was a lot of fun. And then I got to just share with him tidbits that are crazy cheap, almost free, that he can do to on a large scale tend to grassland fertility. He was a cool guy. He was yeah, just a salt of the earth kind of rancher out here in Idaho, actually, where I am right now. And he was just happy to be there talking about soil life, and it was fun.
Yeah, that was awesome. So why don't you tell, you have a lot of amazing tutorials on your, I know you don't like to go through all the different steps and stuff like that, but I did have some, you have a lot of amazing tutorials on different solutions on your on your YouTube and other places. Do you want to tell people about the different tutorials you have on there, and maybe just a quick synopsis on the different
Sure.
types of nutrients that you use?
Yeah. So yeah, IMO, which I said that simple indigenous microbe organism, has four or five stages. So first stage, you're putting out a collection into the forest. You're just grabbing some of your indigenous microbes. Second stage, you're putting it in cryo-freeze, to use a science fiction word, but you're basically causing it to go dormant so that it stays in that same kind of state as when you collected it. And then third phase, you cause it to grow out. So if you start with 100, I used an analogy of cattle, since we're talking about cattlemen. IMO 3, which is a tutorial online, is when, if you say you take a handful, maybe 20 cattle over 100 acres, and you just put them on, but you give them infinite grass and perfect environments, and you get 200,000 cattle in 100 acres. So that's kind of what you're doing with IMO 3. You're taking a little bit of microbes, you're giving them perfect environment, moisture, food source, and then nutrients, which there's a whole list of nutrients that you make with natural farming. They grow out. So now you have this highly dense, kind of like a compost concentrate of indigenous microbes that's very inexpensive. And then you mix that with soil, your local soil, which brings in some of your nematodes and microarthropods and flagellates and et cetera. And so now you have a fourth stage of this IMO grow out. And what that does is it gets everything kind of accustomed to your soil and the microbes that are there. So when you apply this to even fresh and living plants that are even, seedlings, there's no shock to your soil or your environment, because you're using everything's already friends, and which is really nice. You don't have to have that scenario, but really it makes it so there's no downsides. You can apply it, no downsides. You can apply it at any stage in plant life with benefit only. And then IMO 5 is this highly dense microbial community that you created with IMO 4. You can use it to quickly cure high nitrogen material and really effectively. So you could bring in a manure or I think in my video on IMO 5, I use a black soldier fly larva kind of left behind material, super high nitrogen, and you can process it, and now it's cured and ready to be applied again without shocking the root system or anything of your plant. So that's 5 stages of this indigenous microorganism, and the whole point is you're going from a small amount that you collect in the forest. You get a inoculum on your shelf that's shelf stable, you can always pull from it, and then you grow it out so you have a high density of microbes to seed your acreage. That's also very cheap. There's fermented plant juice that's on the video. The idea is to use a inexpensive or free material that's thriving in your local environment. Fermented plant juice, there's a lot of variety of information online, especially in the cannabis community, for fermented plant juice. But you really, I'm going to go into that real quick. The world of agriculture is studying this like crazy. Plant growth hormones, different biochemicals that are in specific plants, and they're extracting it, this very expensive process of extracting these specific biochemicals from all these incredible plants and putting them together into a liquid and selling it to you. And it really works. It's effective to use these beneficial biochemicals. That is how nature causes plants to have these different kind of strengths. And but that's a very expensive process. It's cutting edge technology. And with FPJ, we can take with our eyes, we can observe plants that thrive in our environment. They're always green. They're the first to come up. They have all kinds of energy. They never get whacked with bugs. And it's your weeds. A lot of them are your weeds. And you can ferment it and benefit from all this biochemical technology that they're spending all kinds of money and trying to look at them, and isolate everything. And you can just say, you know what, I'm just going to apply all of it to the plants, and you benefit from real science, but it's just how nature does things. And you're just, anyway, so fermented plant juice, that's a long and deep rabbit hole of tech and talk.
You know what? You know what's amazing is that Kentucky State University actually did a lactobacillus ferment where they actually pre-soaked their fish food in it for, was it 2 or 5 minutes, and then fed it to the fish. They got a 15% increase in growth in fish and a reduction in fish waste. And then Marty actually was, as far as I'm aware, one of the first people to recognize lactobacillus ferments for use in media beds for solid waste removal, and then when we applied it, I took that, applied it to some raft beds that had, like standard lettuce beds, and discovered it's one of the best things for eliminating fish waste that ends up past the fish filters in aquaponics. That super fine silt, the labs loves to just liquefy it within a couple of days. It's gone.
Water clarity, it's
amazing,
insane.
Yeah. It's crystal clear water. It's amazing. And not only that, we have worms, we have shrimp, we have seed shrimp, we have Daphnia, we have all kinds of microorganisms. It doesn't bother anything.
It's basically you're taking the tech of a riverbed, or the in a long-standing natural environment. There's all this diversity of life just existing in the soil. And you're just saying, hey, we're gonna capture that and apply it to something commercial, and it makes so much sense. That's why it's a lot of fun. And so for people that aren't super like scientific minded or don't know a lot about biology, you don't have to. And you start looking at this stuff, and it's pretty intuitive. You just kind of be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like this is happening here, and I'm just transferring it over here, and I get the benefit. My trees come alive, or my plants thrive, and yeah, it's fun.
So some of the other cool stuff. So I don't know, have you ever taken your labs and seeded it with, say, a kefir or a yogurt culture, for instance?
I haven't. I know a lot of people have. I've seen the results.
So the results is that a lot of those that you get from both kefir and yogurt have vitamin B complexes that end up as a byproduct as well. And they actually will increase speed of plant growth. So it can be a great way, grab some yogurt or whatever your chosen choice of lactobacillus is. There's many different interesting ones. Yogurt and kefir and all kinds of things you can get at the grocery store, and experiment. There's all kinds of things. There's all different kinds of ways to do it. We've had some incredible luck with working with a lot of seaweeds and some other stuff, and getting increases in growth speed. And I'm sure you've had a lot of different experimentation as well. Maybe you want to share some of that. Maybe you don't. I don't know if there's anything you want to turn people away from. I know anything with yucca or saponin obviously can be adverse effects on your microbial life, but
I want to discourage store-bought fruit. That whole misnomer, that's just something that people are doing. They want the benefit of the perceived benefit of, like, this fruit is super rich in these things, and that's true. And if you want, you could jump into Cho's Sun. Makes what's called Jadam liquid fertilizer, JLF. So jadam is part of natural farming. The broader, let's call it a broader umbrella that is natural farming, and the Korean natural farming we'll call Chohan Yu. So it's this 80-year-old dude that lives in Korea, one of my teachers, and his son is Choyun's son, and he created jadam. Jadam is a son looking at what dad did and saying, it needs to be simpler, it's got to be easier for the farmer and cheaper. And so he made kind of a edited version of natural farming. So it's cheaper and easier, generally speaking. Not necessarily cheaper, I take that back. Actually, I would increase costs on our orchard if I used jadam, and I would lose benefit. But it's not necessarily better, but there's some great parts of it, and there's some definitely easier things. So I have a video, jadam, JMS, jadam microbial solution, that's really simple. So it's a little bit better than lactic acid bacteria labs, and as far as diversity, and then but not quite as cool as IMO as far as diversity. So it's kind of an in-between. But they have jadam liquid fertilizer where you can just throw anything into water and you never take the solids out. You just strain out the liquids and add more liquids. So you have this constantly building kind of diversity of stuff, but also just you're going, because it's anaerobic, an anaerobic ferment, you're getting more of the contents of the plant and less of the kind of yeasts and bacteria and fungi that exist on a healthy plant. Whereas FPJ, the reason you want a wild collected early in the morning while the dew's still on it is you collect all with it, you collect all this microbial life that helps that plant thrive. And you benefit from that. Whereas if you buy it at the store, it's been bleach washed, it's going to ferment kind of funky and get all kinds of mold stuff going on top because it's fermenting only with whatever microbes were on your hands or the store clerk's hands or whatever it touched from being washed till when you stuck it in your fermentation jar. So follow the instructions on the video. They're important. They're there for a reason. What's another good one to talk about, man?
So I actually wanted to touch on the FPJ real quick. So when I was in Jamaica, they were taking 55-gallon drums and taking sweet sop, sour sop, and mango skins mostly, throwing them in along with cow milk or goat milk and some water and fermenting that for 30 to 45 days, which I thought was very interesting. But not only that, to hear how indigenous grow methods from the Caribbean were very similar, at least maybe not identical, but similar in theory and process to what you were talking about later on. Once I learned what you were doing, it was like very interesting to see a completely opposite end of the world, but similar thought process.
It's all over the world. It's every culture. So we had all these things that the grandfather would pass down to the son, and then the son would pass down to his son, and they would be successful farmers with fertile land and using what they had available. And then we got smart and we learned about chemistry and we just, said, hey, we can do it better and cheaper. But then we got smarter and learned that our soil was all dying, and now we need to go back and learn from Grandpa. But in the U.S., we're about 3 generations away from
Grandpa's dead.
Yeah, exactly. We're about 3 generations away from that knowledge. So we need to go outside and look at where some of this has been preserved. And science is the study of nature. Yes, it happens in colleges, but it also happens over 200 years of repetition and accidental experimentation and using what works. And so you have all these traditional practices that farmers who aren't stupid people, they like their yields. They like what works. Farmers choosing what worked and leaving out what didn't. And so you have this, anyway, so there's a lot of that around the world. There's in Greenland.
We all get the math, right? Like when it comes to yield, like they all know, like the math part is universal, like 20% more, Yay! You know what I mean?
We'll
Like,
keep doing that.
yeah, right.
Everything died. Okay, we won't do that anymore. In Greenland, they take manure from at the last harvest, and there's manure in the field. From take the manure, they'll scoop it up, they'll stuff it in a horn, a hollowed out horn, and then they'll cap it with some wax or some mud, and then they'll bury it 4 feet underground. And then the next year, after the thaw, they'll dig that up, they'll put it in solution, and they'll sprinkle their cropland with it. Now, what have they just done? They've taken all the microbes that developed over the growing year, the spring and summer and fall, and they preserved them below the frost layer, so they didn't freeze, below the freeze layer, and then used them to jumpstart the microbial life in their cropland, before the next year, right as the next year was beginning. And that's just another example of an indigenous practice. They didn't know that there were germs or microorganisms. Somebody just discovered that this worked, and so it was done. And we can look at it and say that's solid science, but they didn't have a microscope.
The original recharge. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, leaf litter. I mean, like I think it makes sense if you look at it logically. Like what falls on the ground and the leaf litter that's there is what's feeding the plant. Like I think that
What forms the soil?
somebody hundreds of years ago would follow that same logic to some extent. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And fungi in that leaf litter, that where plant roots can't digest sand, silt, and clay, fungi can break down all this inorganic matter and extract minor minerals and make it available for your plants. And so all kinds of cool stuff happens. So what natural farming is a look at that, and then a compilation or an elegant putting together of these things that have happened over hundreds of years in Japan and Korea, and then some downloads from the creator himself, as Master Cho would describe, some dreams that he woke up, wrote down, and then saw that they really worked. And but it's, as I have dug into it using a microscope and bouncing off with different experts, PhDs in soil science and microbial life over the years, I've just found that it's a whole lot of really solid science, but it's just an elegant method. So it's something a farmer can take. Have to know everything about everything, but they can take this clear instruction and apply it and get the benefit of what nature's up to.
That's cool. So you talked about your master a couple of times now, and your transition from what you did before and wanting to cut costs. How'd you find out about that? Being in Hawaii, like on an island. I know you talked about some of the challenges you guys face there. Like I know you guys import a ton of food and different things like that. Is like all of those kind of like culminate into one thing, or what? How'd you find out about all this? I guess is kind of.
Yeah.
I was about to ask the same question. I got turned on to KNF because we were kind of pigeonholed because of the fish factor, and I couldn't use anything that would kill the fish, and nothing in KNF, as far as we've discovered, short of ludicrous overdosing, will kill your fish. So how did you come upon this? It's something I'm extremely interested to hear about.
Yeah, for us, it was a bit of provision of circumstance, probably is best way to describe it. And though I call Master Cho Master Cho, it's more of a title that is kind of a Eastern thought thing, kind of like Professor so and so. It would be kind of our equivalent. I don't necessarily see him as my master so much, so just a funny clarification. But no, definitely somebody I learned from, but that's that's just a different way that they approach educators there. We had a epic crop failure. combined with a over 2-year 400% fertilizer cost increase. So we were farming a split operation, 400 acres organic, 400 conventional. And it was just the way our farm was set up. And we were doing both. We'd have washouts and cleanouts. But it was really, really expensive to farm organically in Hawaii using organic inputs, kind of the traditional, just like conventional, but with organic OMRI approved inputs.
Gotcha.
It was killing us. We weren't getting enough of a cost or a price increase. So we ended up letting our certification lapse. We were still organically, but we didn't want to do the clean outs of our silos and stuff because that was just adding costs that we weren't recouping. And so this is where we were when we, and then the conventional fertilizer had jumped because of petroleum prices and
The Chinese buying
conventional.
it all up.
Say that again?
The Chinese buying it all up, trying to corner the market on all the fertilizer.
Yeah, this is about, for us, is about 12 years ago. And sorry.
That's when I got into business too. Yeah, I got, and
You remember what I'm talking about?
Somewhat, yeah. That's
Yeah.
why I jumped in. Sorry, I sorry to interrupt, but go on.
No, yeah, farmers experienced it all over, and we're just like, okay, how do we do it in this new environment? And about the time we're asking that question, we had a 80% crop failure due to a pest. Just a perfect storm of scenario. Big field got mowed, threw all the pests up into the air. They all landed into the thing and went nuts. And so nuts. There's lots of nuts jokes.
Few
nut jokes as a nut farmer.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, and so.
We lost some people.
We lost half of the show.
I'm still here, I think. Oh, Chris is
Hey.
back. Oh, that's just back.
The internet split.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm back.
No, that was
Josh.
the Google issue. That's happened maybe 3 times before out of 88 episodes. Go ahead. You were saying?
Okay. Yeah, so crop failure. We leveraged my dad's house equipment at that time. So we borrow against the future crop for operating expenses for the current crop year. So my dad was losing his house. We sold all the equipment, fleet of 20 tractors and trucks, and laid off 30 employees, and it was the end. And then we got a little bit of crop insurance. Towards the end, my dad was able to keep his house. We bought back a few pieces of equipment and hired back a skeleton crew. And we basically farmed the easiest areas to farm, which at that time, the most productive was our conventional acreage. And during that time, we let the organic go fallow. We couldn't harvest it. We couldn't, we just didn't have even the manpower to mow it. So the grass grew 6 feet tall, and we observed something as a family of farmers. The trees that were kind of yellowing from malnutrition because we weren't able to fertilize as much in organic as we were in conventional, all started becoming green and lush and productive, more nuts on the trees. And we said, there's something there that the extension agents and the experts in the field couldn't tell us. There's something there that's happening that we don't understand, and the experts that we would ask don't understand. And there's little kind of anecdotal things. Oh yeah, well, you're not taking the crop off, so the trees are doing better because you're not taking the crop off. And heard that, but the health was beyond that. There was something else. And so I committed to know nothing. I grew up son of a farmer and hanging out with all the people that walked through and made recommendations and prescriptions based on soil analysis. And we decided to know nothing. And about that time, this pediatrician who had practiced medicine his whole life and observed everybody continually getting sicker, though medicine got better, said something's got to give. And he met Master Cho. He was a Korean American guy named Hoon Park in Hilo. And so he started translating for him, and he came out and visited. And he visited through a grant. He visited my town, this tiny town, 40 minutes from the nearest stoplight in Kohala. And yeah, so I was privileged to be kind of the landing zone of Korean natural farming in the U.S. It was happening in Korea for the last 50 years, but there was nobody translating into English really. It was being translated into English, like a couple books, but not actually communicated. People could kind of wrap their live teacher. So yeah, and that began for us a journey to see if it could work on a large scale. And I began a very intense and loving journey to scale it up, and didn't have anybody to look to. The largest farm running Korean natural farming before that was this 23-acre persimmon farm. And I got to visit. So I went to Korea several times, 8 times over the last 8 years, and visited this persimmon farm. And I was like, okay, this is big enough. Like, what's he doing? And he applied Korean natural farming principles for 3 years. And that was 14 years ago. And so for the last 11 years while I'm visiting, all they do is prune and mulch their prunings and harvest, and sometimes deal with a little bit of pests. And they hadn't fertilized in 11 years. And his orchard looked like his orchard looked like if Mr. Miyagi from Karate Kid had one persimmon tree, and he gave it all his love and his effort and all the fertilizer it ever wanted, and it was just lush and beautiful and perfect giant persimmons. But he had 23 acres of this where every tree looked like that. And I was jealous, and I said, okay, so that it actually doesn't matter how much I spend. If this is expensive, if I can do it for 3 years and then do nothing for 11 years, it'll work out. And so we're experiencing perpetual health in our orchard. And so, yeah, that was some of our journey. I did a lot of mistakes in scaling, and I came to a place where I created a liquid IMO recipe that's a little deviation from how they do it in Korea. And I have that online. So that if you could get to a point where you're creating that liquid IMO that I demonstrate in that video, creating a really good IMO 3 and then making liquid IMO, you can farm anything with that, and you can farm it cheaply. So yeah.
That's amazing to hear that you can reduce the costs that much and still produce that well.
It's fun. Yeah, we use the amount of nitrogen that's recommended for macadamia nuts is we use about 5% of the recommended amount of nitrogen per year, if that. And we're getting yields that are increasing steadily each year, and as much or more than the people in our state and our industry.
So it falls in line with the study I think Charlie posted not too long ago. Steve, you remember the one I'm talking about, where it was the aquaponics was better utilizing nutrients, so it was getting better growth with the same amount of nutrients, or the same amount of growth with way less nutrients in some situations. So better utilization of what's there, is something.
The biomass production per total ppm level with aquaponics, again, in a similar manner to what you guys do, because we're relying so much more heavily on microbial life being the main factors in nutrient delivery, and not so much just raw throwing nutrients at it like a traditional hydroponic system that we can again use a quarter or less of the traditional nutrient levels for not all but most nutrients. Micronutrients not as much, but definitely for macro.
I built a commercial. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You go ahead, Chris.
I built a commercial aquaponic system right about the time I was getting into natural farming in Hawaii. We did, it wasn't huge. It was an experiment to see if we should diversify our crop. We were going to do a huge series of systems if we thought it was a good business plan. So we had like 4 40-foot by 4-foot grow beds. So we're doing about 100 pounds of lettuce a week out of that baby romaine. And I played with a bunch of natural farming stuff with it. It was a lot of fun. I liked natural aquaponics, but when we looked at it, the cost for us, or what we could do if we made this huge one, we just realized, like, with this natural farming, if we just did macadamia nuts 20% better, because we were already so big, we couldn't beat that with lettuce. So we just stuck with mac nuts, but it was fun. But I would be careful introducing a huge diversity of fungus. That's something I didn't get to play with it long enough to really come to a solid conclusion, but I would theorize that you're better sticking with those bacterial ferments like fermented plant juices and LAB than jumping too deep into real IMO production and getting it into your aquaponics. I think something kind of was a little funky with that amount of microbial diversity in a water system. It was like it was foreign.
So you have to do IMOs, but you have to do aquatic IMOs.
Right.
Well, see, I was thinking about that with my outdoor aquaponic system. In a way,
version,
they
and I applied that straight to my grow beds and could see mycelium growing over the top right away. It was pretty interesting, but it didn't really seem to have any negative effects in my system.
So just on that exact topic, so in Colorado, I had a whole bunch of clients that were doing rainbow trout and brook trout and other things at above 7,000 feet. A whole bunch of different clients, a lot of preppers and stuff when I worked at the aquaponics source. And what I always told them is go to your local trout stream nearby your house, any brook, and scoop up some of the sediment and put it into your filter. And even if it's just in the bottom, or put it in the bottom of your media bed or in your grow bed, that's totally fine. And what it'll do is it'll introduce those super cold tolerant nitrifying bacteria that it'll happily live in that cold weather environment. And that's something that it's taken me a while, and that I noticed it first with koi stuff on the East Coast. If I went up to the Poconos of Pennsylvania and I got some sediment from there and introduced it to some of the koi ponds, the koi would do much better, because whatever it was broke down nitrogen and made it nitrate, even when it got super cold, and didn't keep it in that nitrite form that was a lot more fish toxic. And that was just a happenstance thing when I used to do very expensive koi ponds. And this was just happened to be because of where I had clients, and I just took some sediment and I just thought about it mentally and went, hey, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to try it and see if it changes my chemistry. And it worked. Again, it's just about seeding the microbes, just the same thing that you're doing with the IMO. It's an IMO. It's just a cold weather nitrification. And you know what's interesting with the microbes, especially, let's use nitrogen for example. So traditionally, you're told that you have the nitrospira converts ammonia to ammonium to nitrite, and then a nitrosoma converts nitrite to nitrate. They've actually found microbes that can do straight ammonia to nitrate and completely skip the nitrate process altogether. Or if it does, it's doing it internally. They found other microbes. They've found 3 separate microbes that can do that alone. They have not fully fleshed that out, nor have they mapped out all the different ones for different temperature ranges. So we know so little about we don't know that much about a terrestrial microbial creatures. We know even less about aquatic creatures as far as how they break down nutrients or how they benefit any kind of soil food web or aquatic food web.
That's a really good point, is we understand so little. And what you're doing is intuitive. What you talked about, grabbing, like you just did something, and that's kind of wisdom. Like you didn't have knowledge about it, but you applied kind of wisdom, where you're like, I don't understand it, but I'm gonna not mess with it. I'm just gonna do what nature's doing in this. And I think that's key. If you're gonna mess with natural farming, I think it's key to kind of be like, okay, I'm not gonna try and say I understand all of this, because all of academia doesn't understand at all of this. I think 0.03% of what goes on in the microbiological world is a high number for us, and it's ever increasing. We're learning more, but and most of that's about human pathogens. But the thing with natural farming is the kind of commitment to say we're not going to mess with it too much. We're going to apply what we do know, and yet kind of be humble with what we don't know. And it works. Kind of just saying, hey, I'm not going to mess with nature too much. I just want to use it how it already works really well. And it's pretty effective.
I'm sold. I mean, we've been having Brain Grow and a bunch of other people. We've been right along this topic of conversation for months, and I'm sold. And I live in a swamp. I can't wait to get started. I got, like you said, I got the weeds. I got the weeds you can't kill, I know we've been talking about this, how you can find your fungi, from the roots of these plants that don't die, right? And your indigenous plant.
You want to explain to people a little bit real quick, just on that exact note, since you brought up weeds, how when you have the right soil microbes, that weeds go away because the microbes change? Because I know you and Elaine Ingram are part of the two people that I've met that have very good ideas on that, and then can explain it in a way that most people can digest.
Yeah. I actually we actually got a grant from the RMD of the County of Hawaii to duplicate something I did exactly on this topic. A friend of ours is he was at my dad's wedding. He's kind of like in Hawaii we call him Hanai, kind of like adopted uncle. He's not really family, but he's family in Hawaii. And so he was having this problem where his pasture doesn't produce grass anymore, and his hobby is growing 2 cattle on 2 acres. He gets them his wean offs, he grows them out, and he takes them to market, and he makes $1,000 or something each. He enjoys it. He enjoys feeding them. He enjoys talking to them. But it was really frustrating because his cattle didn't have grassland anymore. And so he calls us up because he gets this quote to disc it, which is like 18-inch disc. He's going to just tear up this pasture and turn it under 3 times and then reseed it. And part of the problem is he had this plant called fireweed. And it's the bane of the cattlemen of Hawaii. And I think it's actually a problem in Texas and stuff too. But it's this yellow flower that when cows eat it, they die. It produces a toxin for them in their gut, and they lay down, they stop eating. And sorry, this is going to be a slightly longer story to explain, but it'll be, I think, helpful. And so one of his cows ate it. After he asked us about this quote, it was this pretty expensive quote to get this done. I was like, that's not going to change your problem. Your problem is microbial, and it was because I saw all that. Us on our commercial land, we were still a split operation at that time. We started natural farming on our organic before we even stopped being commercial. And on our commercial land, there was an herbicide strip during harvest where they herbicide this 10-foot strip right under where all the nuts dropped so that they didn't have to mow all the time. And everything would die. And the first thing to pop back up was fireweed, this yellow flower plant. And what I had learned through studying microbial life in the soil is that glyphosate causes a deoxygenation of the soil. Oxygen can't be taken up in the areas where it's been applied. And so all your oxygen-loving microbial life dies. It's like this suffocation. And so there's no life basically in these soil strips where it's been sprayed. But the first thing to come back, the fastest thing to recover is bacteria. Fungi takes longer. It needs to be physically, a seed of it, a spore has to physically land in that area and get going or be there already. It just takes longer to get established, whereas bacteria can get going right away. So this fireweed, I hypothesized, was bacterial loving. That's why it can come up faster than the grass in these areas, because it could thrive in this new microbial climate. And so to disc all of his pasture land was going to just cause these bacterial loving plants to continue to mash any of fungal connections that there were. He wasn't really going to get any solution. It wasn't going to make his land more fertile. And I talked to my dad. We were crazy in the company with him, and our equipment's occupied. I'm trying to ramp up our natural farming on our land. And at the same time, I'm like, we should help him, his family. And this bid that he's getting is way expensive, and it's not going to fix his problem. So I said, I'll do it on my free time if I can rent some of our equipment. My dad's he does things by the book. I don't get to use the equipment just because I'm the manager of the company. Nobody does, so I could rent it. Anyway, so I jump in and I make a couple tons of IMO4 for application on his pasture land. And I lightly spade. Anyways, apply it, mulch it, and then watch. I did a seeding just with a little bit of grass, but I just applied IMO. Did a very light mulch on this 2 acres and watched. And in a period of 3 months, all the fireweed got diseased. All these different things started happening to it. All the fireweed got powdery mildew. And then it would get whacked by bugs. So I'd pull up, I'd look at one fireweed. I didn't pull any fireweed in there, but I pulled 1 or 2 just to look at them. We're talking 2 acres of solid fireweed. And right around the where the stalk and the roots met, it would get covered in aphids, and they just eat through these plants. So within 3 months, 100% of the fireweed had died, and the grass had come up like gangbusters. It was super thick. He had to mow because his 2 calves couldn't keep up with it. He ended up buying 2 more calves and getting them on. He raised 4 calves to market. He didn't water. He didn't irrigate. I mean, it is Hawaii, but we had some dry spells. And so now his 2 cows no longer can keep up with grassland production. It's 5 years later. He's never had single bit of fireweed return. Right on the other side of an electric fence where I didn't apply any IMO, it was still solid fireweed in the neighbor's pasture. And slowly there's been a buffer growing away from his pasture because I think microbes are moving in the soil. But I had the UH extension agent come out. He did all that. I did bioanalysis of the soil before and after. And it was the microbial life switched, and it no longer became a hospitable environment for this bacterial-loving, imbalance-loving weed. And so the grass can thrive, but the weed no longer can actually even survive in this now balanced microbial climate. And so that same principle applies for farmers. Your crop loves actual a fungally dominated soil, as much as 30-to-1 fungally dominated, 2 bacterial, and you'll become, so like the plant produces complete fats and proteins in its cell wall when it's really healthy. But when it's weak, it'll actually not be able to produce those complete fats and proteins in its cell wall. And so it becomes fast food for critters, for bugs. They can easily eat through that cell wall and process all that nice, sweet cytoplasm inside the sun. Whereas a super healthy plant is like this really tough meal. Like you got to eat through, 10 pounds of celery before you can get a bite of bread, and it's so because of that, a super healthy plant, you won't get this huge bloom of pests just because they can't process that plant as well. Whereas a super weak field of plants is actually going to become just a breeding zone for pests because it's such readily available food. So yeah, both pests and weeds can actually be affected by balancing your soil microbial life.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. So what is the best, because everyone says that cannabis loves more fungal dominated soil. What is the best way to boost the fungal dominance of your soil? What do I add? What do I make? What do I brew? What do I ferment to increase the fungal dominance? Because it's so hard to get a straight answer to what do I add to increase the fungal dominance. So I'm glad to have you on, and I really hope you can give us even if it's a long answer, just an answer.
It's not a long answer, but it's a long journey as a student of soil and or microbial life. It's not like this quick thing. You could buy a bunch of fungal inoculums from the store, bugs in a jug. That could be a quick answer for somebody, but it's expensive. That's not a cheap answer, and it has that fall off, so you're buying it again. But the best answer is to become good at producing a highly fungal or fungally diverse and dense IMO 3 and 4. You can send away your finished product to something like Earthfort. It's a biolab, and they'll do analysis on it. I think it's $109 to do an analysis on, eight grams. No, how much? Anyways, it's like a little bit in the bottom of Ziploc. You send them away a sample, and they'll analyze for you how bacterial or fungal your sample is. So if you make a highly anyways, you'll get to check your work. I've learned to do that with my own microscope, and that's something, but that's another learning curve. You're gonna have to learn to develop an eye and understanding what you're seeing, bacterial or fungal. But basically, if you can get an indigenous inoculum that's fungally dominated, well, then you can get that fungally dominated inoculum to go on your soil over and over, and you're constantly buffering towards fungi. Once those guys get established and you feed them, so humic, fulvic acid are helpful fungal foods, and then some woody material or high carbon, low nitrogen ratio material. And people like they like coconut coir for some of the plantings you guys are doing, but that isn't actually woody enough. So you need wood chips or something to top dress for that fungal food.
So what is your opinion on sawdust? Because I hear a lot of mixed results about sawdust, and you're a great person to ask on this.
Yeah, I'm turning on a light. I'll be right there. So sawdust is awesome. However, uncured sawdust is, you'll have a shock initially. So what people probably encounter is that they'll get kind of like a bad performance initially from sawdust. So if you're going to use straight sawdust, one of the ways you can avoid that is soak it in ocean water to make it more easily processed by your fungi and etc. You could even soak it and let it kind of dry out or squeeze it out afterwards.
The sodium has no effect on the fungi?
No, it gets balanced by the whole carbon, high carbon material, and you don't want you don't want table salt. You don't want to make salt water out of table salt. You want to make sea water or sea salt without any anti-caking agent kind of thing. So, and at the rate of seawater, or you can dilute it if you're concerned to a rate of 1 to 30. So interesting thing, another natural farming just philosophy thing since we just come to it. So this is from the Bible. So in the Bible, the water, the ocean was made, and then the land came up out of the ocean. So in natural farming philosophy, the ocean is the mother of the land. And then out of the land came plants and humans. And so then you look at plants, and plants' blood or cytoplasm is seawater diluted at a rate of 1 to 30. And humans' blood is basically our, what's that non-blood cell stuff that's in our blood? Just skip my head.
Plasma.
Plasma is ocean water, basically. And so in natural farming, we use ocean water as a input at a rate of 1 to 30 because it's basically like plants' blood. So yeah, ocean water, the salt is not going to affect it at all. And if you have high microbial communities, they'll use all that minor mineral to process that wood chips, and it'll just make it more available for your fungi.
That's really interesting. I did a lot of work with there's like probably 5 or 6 different products that are basically seawater minus the sodium for plants, and I've had a lot of great luck with them in aquaponics, but it's interesting to hear about them with that as well.
Yeah, it's if you can ferment seawater, yeah, but you want to dilute seawater. I'm not recommending you use seawater straight in application, just for soaking wood chips.
So you would soak them, and then would you give them a freshwater rinse to pull at least a little bit of the sodium, or would you just soak them, dry them out a little bit, and then use them?
I'd use them, but you have to understand how to make IMO if you're going to use sawdust. Or you could top dress just lightly.
Yeah, plus you'd also have to think of whatever kind of tree you're dealing with, because some are more acidic, some are more alkaline.
Yeah. With the IMOs, if you're making IMO properly, it'll balance your pHs. So we had all these recommendations from our experts in our orchards, and we'd have these alkaline soils or these basic soil tests, and they say, oh, apply lime at 10 tons per acre, and or whatever, 2 tons per acre, and we got that same prescription for 10 years straight, and we did it. And about the same time I started asking about what's happening in our organic orchard that's coming alive after leaving it to go fallow or rest, I said, maybe that prescription isn't working. And all our orchards are completely pH balanced now, or stay right within that realm of balance. And we don't apply anything to balance our pH. And we used to have all kinds of pH issues when we were applying conventionally. So I think with balanced microbial diversity, I remember one thing I was going to say about how little we understand about microbes. One of the things we understand nothing about, like literally nothing, is the interaction between diversity of microbial life. We understand, we will isolate one microbe and we'll kind of get a feel for what it does, but we understand so very little about take 300 DNA diverse, which is a small group of diversity, 300 different microbial bodies in a community in soil, and we don't actually understand how they affect each other or what they do in teaming up to process nutrients or make them available. That is so little understood in the world of microbiology.
Everything you say makes sense to me. I tell you, it makes sense. So it's so naturally, like you said, when the master was telling you, it just kind of flows into you. I'm sorry, Steve, you wanted to ask something else.
I think that's one of the things that I think I've learned. I started it off with aquaponics, And when I first started off working at the aquaponics source, no one could even tell me what nutrient range aquaponics should be. The University of Virgin Island was the only one that even had that. And then I focused in on that. And then all of a sudden I got turned on to Korean natural farming and some of the microbial stuff. And then I realized my whole way of thinking about trying to hone in on these tight ranges of nutrient ranges was wrong. I needed to factor in the microbial stuff so much more than I was giving it. And once I did that, I realized, I think I could get way lower than the nutrient ranges I'm even doing now. And then suddenly, you can fully get, not all, but the bulk of your nutrient supply off of your fish. And now I'm, generating fish and meat and cannabis or medicine or whatever else. But it was really interesting. And now we're discovering how to even improve aquaponics far above and beyond anything that anyone ever done, especially in regards to filtration, removing a lot of the heavy mechanical stuff that, a lot of people do, decoupled or bead filters, a bunch of other stuff that cost a bunch of money. And we're achieving stuff that is not only less money and equipment, but significantly better results than anyone else doing any of this stuff that costs significantly more, the same way that you're running it with fertilizer. And it's just really awesome to see how the whole industry has evolved and how everything's kind of moving towards that, and how I think that, it's kind of the future of all agriculture, be it organic hydroponics or aquaponics or soil or anything, because it just makes such a night and day difference. Even applying it and hybridizing it, it's not even close. It's almost laughably different because of how much better of a job it does.
Everything is becoming hybridized. That's plain and simple. Just like the dual root zone, you're hybridizing a soil and aquaponics together, which is built off hydroponics. It's like just an ever evolving equation. It's pretty awesome though. And I tell you what, anybody listens to this and have done a little research for a little bit, you have to see it. You have to see how logical it is, especially once we started getting into the microbial and the fungal aspects of the subsoil and all that. In the root zone, it just makes sense. It just makes so much sense, and it does. We all know that if you have a healthy plant and it's treated in the right environment, good growers that keep their place clean and do everything, even if it's by the rules, so to speak, they don't have the pests that other people have because they make a healthy plant. We discuss how if the plant's healthy, it'll propel the pest by its own nature, right?
Sorry, I accidentally muted myself there. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, once you're, that's the biggest thing I've noticed with, and let's just use the example they have with the University of Kentucky State. They used a simple one with very basic lactobacillus ferment, about as simple as it gets. And not only did their plant growth increase, they increased fish growth by 15%. Why? Because they ignored the fish, they ignored the plants. They honed it on the microbes, because that's what makes everything work. If they're happy, everything else fixes itself automatically and will balance itself. And that's exactly what he preaches. And on that note, I'd love for you to please explain the reason why unrefined sugar is better than molasses, because that is one of the things that I have been as hotly debated. And you are someone that could actually give me a great logical scientific answer on that, because I've had so much smoke blown up my ass, and I love it. And I'd love to have you clarify the different types of sugars, why some are better than others, and maybe just a quick, a couple of minutes on that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's for anybody that's had to deal with that whole process. I apologize. That's I understand that can be frustrating. Just the debate. Yeah, and as I go into this explanation, let me be clear that I am in no way against molasses. I don't think it's evil. I don't think it's a bad thing. It has tons of function, great animal feed, and all kinds of stuff. But in natural farming, there is actually a reason for it not being used in FPJ or for storage of LAB or some of these other components. So, we use sugar for FPJ, not as a food or a fermenter, but because of its dryness. And one of the things that I actually plan to experiment with when I gain a little free time to farm and play around, and which just keeps seeming farther away. Is that playing with salt? I think we may be able to ferment with salt in FPJs in like sea salt. But anyways, that's way off topic. The reason we ferment with sugar and then use sugar for storage isn't actually because it's a food, though it's helpful as a food in part. It's because of its dryness. If you take so sugar has this great bonding capability with water, and so if you take for example, if you take a paper towel, you spill a little puddle of water on your table, and you take the edge of a paper towel and you touch it to that water, all of a sudden the water that was sitting there in that nice puddle actually moves across and gets pulled into the paper towel. It diffuses, or by the process of osmosis, moves into the paper towel. And it's because paper towels are very dry. There's not a huge complex reason. It's just the dryness is like a great place for water to move towards, chemically speaking. And so with FPJ and for storage, the reason we mix it, the reason it gets wet right away, if you've made FPJ, the reason that water forms right away isn't because it's fermenting or there's enzymes. It is simply because the dryness of the sugar is pulling on the moisture inside the plant and causing, through a process called osmosis, osmotic pressure, or the dryness of the sugar is actually pulling on the moisture from the plant. And then it ferments a bit while it sits in the plant material and sugar and the juices of the plant. It ferments a bit over that 5 to 7 days that we make FPJ. But that initial water that's pulled out is pulled out because of the dryness of the sugar. Now, molasses, if you did that same thing, molasses doesn't have that same osmotic pressure. Molasses is kind of balanced in its dry, wet kind of ratio. So molasses will stop things from moving because it will deprive it of oxygen or anything. It deprives it from all kind of, it's like a liquid container. So molasses can create a liquid container, and so stuff won't happen under molasses because water can't get in and nothing really penetrates it. But that's not really what we're trying to do in natural farming. I take IMO1 and I mix it with sugar because I want to take, so microbes to do their processes, I should have started with this, need moisture. Even a little bit, or your desert microbes, they use moisture in their process. They use water. And so in IMO1, if I mix it with this specific weight of brown sugar, it's equal weights for a reason, I am actually combining it with enough sugar to trap all the moisture that's in that IMO1 collection, or most of it, and not overdo it. I'm not crazy drying it out. And so all the moisture in these bodies get trapped, and the IMO doesn't get to keep making generations of microbial life. It doesn't keep fermenting. It just kind of goes dormant. So your fungal bodies will sporulate, and they'll make spores, and they'll just sit there waiting to be reintroduced to water. So it's like cryofreeze. Again, I like that. It's a science fiction term, but it helps kind of us wrap our heads around it. And so this is important when I want to have something as true as it was in nature on my shelf, dormant 3 months later, so that I can use it to wake up and get growing on a substrate or a media. So really important for IMO2 that you don't use molasses, because the osmotic pressure we want, not food. If you're trying to make food for, you're making EM or something, or bokashi, then yes, molasses can be a food source, and diluted in water, it can be excellent. But not for this, especially this IMO2 process. And then for the FPJ process, the same thing. Once we do that initial fermentation and we strain, we want to make sure there's enough sugar in that FPJ so it's not bubbling and going off and turning into alcohol. Enough sugar that it'll sit on that shelf dormant and not further ferment. If I took FPJ and I added half again its volume of water, it would turn into alcohol. That's how alcohol is made: microbes, sugar, and specific amount of oxygen or regulated oxygen, or it'd turn into vinegar. That amount of sugar in an FPJ causes it to stay shelf stable and maintain its integrity. So yeah, we aren't using it for food. We're actually using it for its physical properties more than its food source. So then sugar-wise, unrefined sugar is great if you can get it. There's a bunch of different varieties of just kind of raw cane sugar. But if not, if you can just get the C&H brown sugar from Costco, it's fine. It is refined sugar with some molasses added back in, but it doesn't have the viscous quality that molasses has. And then real quick, a nod to compost tea. People are like, why not use molasses in aerated compost tea? And it is actually has more to do with the physical properties of molasses again than its food source quality. Molasses is a good food source. It is a good fungal food, but you put a bunch of molasses into a container with bubbling air and it creates molasses bubbles. And those will go anaerobic in the center as the microbes go ballistic, and you'll actually create all these micro anaerobic pockets that will skew your compost tea to imbalance high ciliate levels and bacterial levels if you're trying to get a balanced fungal tea. Let's I could go deeper or longer. I could nerd out on this.
Yeah,
no, that was fantastic, man. That's explained it.
A lot of people. Now, I don't know. Can you touch real quickly on how to stabilize people's ferments? Because that's something else a lot of people do wrong and end up screwing that up. But that's something else you wouldn't be touching on.
Yeah. So FPJ, like I have a video that teaches FPJ, but FPJ, there's finer points. And that's where a lot of this is hard. Like, we put this information out online, but it's really helpful to hang out and farm with somebody that knows what they're doing, because all these details that you just learn over time, and that's hard to communicate in videos, and it's hard to communicate even in a short class. And so it's better to experience a bunch of it, run into all the problems, and then be able to go back to a teacher with those things that come up, and then go back and refine and refine. So if you feel like there's a lack of information, it's understandable, but it's because this is more like learning art or cooking than it is like learning math necessarily. But yeah, so FPJ, if you have a dry plant, you're going to need less sugar. So if you're not using like if I go whack a banana off and I make an FPJ with it, or a FFJ, or an orange, I have tons of water and I need a lot of sugar to create the right balance in that fermentation, kind of an equal sugar to water balance, where most of the water is kind of trapped in a chemical bond to sugar molecules. But if I have a drier plant and I use too much sugar, I won't get any speed in fermentation. Like, if I have too much dry a plant and I overdo it with sugar, then it'll kind of like stall out and it won't ferment. So it's that right balance of sugar to moisture in my plant. Now, if I ferment with too little sugar, like I do that 5 to 7 days with too little sugar, and then I strain it off and I put my FPJ on the counter, it'll have too much water in there with infinite food source and lots of microbial life from the yeasts and bacteria that were on that plant in the wild, and it'll keep going. It'll keep fermenting. It'll keep producing alcohols with those sugars. It'll bubble. And so what I need to observe as I ferment is that I have the right amount of sugar to my total water. And then when I go to put it on the shelf, I want to make sure that my FPJ or FFJ is super saturated with sugar, basically all up in sugar bonds because the dry sugar is in there, and then it'll just sit there dormant until I reintroduce it to water. Does that work?
Yeah, what would be an example of drier plants? Since you brought up banana and oranges, wet plants where you would need less sugar or more sugar than
Like mugwort. Do you have mugwort there in where you guys are? Or
well,
sage,
I got it in a
if you want to
packet of I
ferment.
got a package of seeds with mugwort. I haven't
Nice.
even started.
So you can. What's a good one that I'm using right now? So dandelion. Dandelion's wet, but it's not as wet as like a papaya or, or rhubarb. Rhubarb's pretty wet.
Okay, yeah. Like
Whereas
celery. Yeah.
dandelion, yeah, it has not as much. So I'm probably going to use a less total shame than I would with a rhubarb.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you are using a drier plant, it is really important morning where it has all its kind of life and moisture in it before it kind of respirates with the sun and loses some of its juice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've often heard that you can cut it with 50% liquid molasses or other stuff. It's great to finally get clarification on that.
How
Now,
are we doing in chat? We got any questions?
One nod real quick while you look for questions. If you wanted to play with dehydrated molasses, that does work. Because of the dryness. Again, we're going back to physical properties, not so much. So I have found people that have a hard time getting sugar. It's expensive. Dehydrated molasses is really cheap. And yeah, that can work.
That's very good.
That's been my go-to. That's been my go-to for most of my ferments is the powdered molasses. I found the cheapest way to get it is you can buy it in 40 to 55 pound sacks at your local feed store. They actually use it for cattle feed, and it can be some of the most cost-effective way to supply a sugar source, at least with the method that I was using. I understand now that it's maybe not necessarily the best way, but it was very cost-effective at the time.
Yeah, and that's key.
Of course, ag supplies are also great for that too.
Yep.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions about the difference? Oh, I had one last question, if you wouldn't mind. Is can you explain to people a little bit about Oriental herbal nutrient? Because that was something that, again, it's a multi-step process, and it's something that I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to figure out how to wrap my head around, and kind of open a whole new rabbit hole for me. I'm super stoked to hear about.
Yeah, I was stoked to hear about you being an herbalist and having herbal medicine as I learned some things from our conversation there in Humboldt. That was fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's so OHN, it's just one thing real quick. It's best if you don't have all the ingredients, just make it with what you have. Of the 5 ingredients, if you don't have all of them, make it with 2. In India, it's so hard for them to get the herbs. They make it with ginger and garlic exclusively, and they have all kinds of the same kind of results and usefulness with it. So yeah, don't add a bunch of things off the top of your head because you're like, I really like this plant, I'm going to bring it into my OHN. Do that elsewhere or after you really get a feel for how it performs as it's taught, because otherwise you'll never know if it's working or not working. So OHN is a combination about 5 herbs, really kind of comes out of traditional Chinese medicine in its reasoning, but through Japan. And it's they all are, I think they're warm in the traditional Chinese medicine lingo, but basically what they do is they promote immunal health in your plant and even in your microbial communities. They promote immunal health, not so much knock out pathogens. They promote the organism's ability to deal with pathogens, and they aren't pleasant for some of your smaller microbes. So the way it works in the microbial world is a lot of your beneficials that we understand, though there's interactions that we don't understand. So I say this with recognition that I know nothing. What we understand is a lot of our beneficials for plants are bigger. Lactobacillus, it's a huge bacteria. A lot of our fungi that we know are beneficial are large. And so some of this antipathogenic properties of these 5 herbs are also somewhat difficult for our smaller microbes to deal with. And so yeah, you do a little bit of fermentation to make these herbs and plants available. So it's ginger, garlic, licorice root, cinnamon, and angelica. And there's 2 parts of angelica root. And you ferment it for 7 days, and then you tincture it. So this, after the initial fermentation, which really helps it be available, you're not really fermenting any longer. You're now causing the physical properties of these herbs to suspend into alcohol. And so there's this 3 months of stirring, and that stirring is for the kind of fusing or infusing of your these herbs, and it micronizes it. It really helps it become highly available in its function and use. And if you didn't stir it, say you did this process, but you just said, oh, it's too much stirring, you would never have fusion between these herbs and your alcohol base. They would just stay separate. You'd have a clear alcohol sitting on the top. You'd have all your herbal content sitting on the bottom. And so it's this very specific process to get the most out of the out of these herbs that aren't super cheap. But though OHN is kind of the big investment of natural farming, the amount you use is homeopathic. It's tiny. On our farm, 800-acre farm, I use, I think, 16 gallons per year. So for it's hard to say that because people are like, what is 800 gallons like compared to what I'm doing? So for like say a 20 by 20 garden, you might use 2 ounces over 4 years or something like that, or just ridiculously small amount depending on what you're spraying. So yes, there's some investment to make OHN, but you can put it on the shelf, and because it becomes more micronized over the years, it actually gains in potency over 3 years. After 3 years, you just call it a wash and you use it at the same rate. But you use it at a rate of 1 to 1,000 for the first year, 1 to 1,500 for the second year, and 1 to 2,000 for the third year. So it's double potency after 3 years. So making a little bit for 5 years worth of OHN and leaving it on the shelf, it's just a tool in your shed.
That's awesome. So how would you recommend storing that? Would you recommend storing it in the fridge or at room temperature? That's another question I get a lot of.
No, just with a lid on. So OHN is not alive, but alcohol will evaporate if you don't have a solid lid. So no, room temperature is fine. I recommend, just so it doesn't, you don't want it constantly heating. Store it like you would your wine, basically. You want it to kind of maintain so if you have a concrete floor somewhere under something tucked in the dark, I'd store it there.
Awesome.
Yeah. And HDPE is something we use if you're going to use plastic. Never use PP plastic, only PE, polyethylene.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to tell people? I know you do a bunch of classes and stuff. Do you want to tell people about the classes you got coming up before we let you go? And how do people how do they find you and how do they sign up?
Yeah, so building a website that it's a huge resource with a lot of these, just my language, not because I'm special, but just because I find that a lot of the information is hard to sort through. So naturalfarming.co is the website that is in development, but you can get on a mailing list to hear updates about classes. I'm doing one class this year. I'm doing it in July in Boise, Idaho. It's a 5-day class. There'll be a short crash course in microscopy, the use of a microscope, and but we'll go through all the basics of natural farming. You'll get certified to teach a level 1 class. Basically, you'll be a certified teacher of a crash course in natural farming, which people teach usually on a weekend or something. But yeah, it's 5 days, a lot of hands-on. We're doing this stuff together, and that's in Boise, Idaho, July 9th through 13th. You can find it on Eventbrite. CGNFI is the acronyms, but it's just natural farming level 2. And yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Soil Stewart, and you can find me on Facebook, though mostly kid stuff on Facebook. But yeah, and then the YouTube. It's the borrowed platform of teaching things. So there's a bunch of videos on there.
For now, until they ban us.
Right. Yeah. So build the website quickly.
We'll talk about that right after your section. We've actually re-uploaded our website to a bunch of new websites in case YouTube gets uppity.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I probably should do that too.
Dude, do not trust anything. One of the biggest horrible things. There's a guy named Myers Mushrooms.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, he's one of the leading experts in edible mushrooms for the gourmet chef thing. Does not a single thing on psychedelics, not a single thing on anything to do with anything untoward in any way, shape, or form. Had his whole channel deleted. The guy had almost some ludicrous amount of subscribers, and just they deleted him for no reason. The guy wasn't, no warning, no strikes, just up and deleted him. So I've been in the process of I had the whole channel backed up, and in a minute or two we'll go over all the different news platforms. But thank you so much for taking the time to join us. You're welcome anytime. It was very much a huge pleasure to have you on and to educate everyone on Korean natural farming. And thank you for all you do, and thank you for kind of taking the torch and moving forward with this whole kind of direction of education and farming.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, man. It's an honor, and I'm just grateful for the time in our lives to get to play with this stuff. So yeah, and the nature we get to do it with. It's kind of the big gift, right? We all get it. We all get nature as the big gift. We just need to kind of figure out what it's doing. Good to see you.
Thanks again for coming on.
Yeah, that was great information. Awesome.
Yeah. Good to talk to all you guys. I'll talk to you again.
Bye, Chris.
See ya.
Good night.
So what's new with you, Josh? I saw you had some video going a little earlier.
Oh, I was just showing today I was planting my aquaponic beds. And Roger and I got cut off the other night we were talking, but I've been running this like kind of funny like wanky aquaponic system where it's like a low flow instead of a up and down. And so I decided to put a timer on there so that it gets a period of oxygen, actually a lot more periods of oxygen. And anyways, those strawberries I took off overnight. It was crazy. And so shame on me for not doing things proper. And yeah, I don't know. What else is new? I'll show you this. Let's see here. Switch. I've been working on packaging, so I'm pretty impressed with this. This is an ounce jar. It's a mason jar with a silicone sleeve, so it doesn't let light in. It's got the lid, recycled plastic deal, and it's got my little logo on it. And then for oil, I got this guy right here.
Awesome.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
Got some rosin in here I made this weekend. That was actually a really fun weekend, man. I should talk about that. I had a guy that I've been talking to for the last year. He's making this industrial rosin machine, and so he came over, and he also made a sifter too. That was rosin that the bag blew, so it had some stuff in it, but it's pretty tasty.
Dirty.
Yeah, it got a little dirty. But I whipped it up too. I like whipping it up these days.
Actually, on that note, let me go grab some concentrate from a listener.
But anyways, we sifted this hash with vibration instead of ice and vibration, and then we sieved it, and then I had some hash that I had 6 ounces of hash that I had already dried out, and we pressed it in his rosin machine. Nice, dude. What is that?
So this is courtesy of a gentleman I will refer to only as Jono. He gave me this. I went to go visit him, and I had to go visit a client or a opportunity business meeting I had up there, and he had offered me some of this stuff when I stopped by to visit a friend of mine. So I just wanted to give him the chirps. This is super chirpy and just super clear. This thing's almost full. I have to keep it moving or it's gonna like goop out onto my computer. But I wanted to show it off because the guy's a miracle worker.
Cool. So yeah, we sifted. I should say he also had a pretty cool grinder. So this is all industrial stuff. So we did 66 pounds of fresh frozen for my last harvest. We ground it, shredded it, not ground. I have some videos. We shredded it in like 40 minutes, 40 minutes, and then threw it back in the freezer, and then we washed it all in like 2 hours with this machine. And then he's able to press 4 ounces at a time, and it just squirts out instead of being on the parchment paper where you have to like recollect it and then dab it out into your individual jars. It's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
You can just squirt it out right into the jars. It comes out of funnel type thing. I can't talk too much about it. It's an NDA thing. So he came up and demoed it for me, and the idea was I kind of helped him with ideas on how we could refine the process. But I can't say too much more than that. But it was pretty cool to get all that material washed real quick. And yeah, and just once it started flowing, I was pretty skeptical of the process, to be honest. And but once it started flowing, we were both giggling.
Looks like you got some sexy ladies behind you. You want to tell us what you got going on?
This is my failing clone op. I'm supposed to be cloning these off. In the winter time, I think I talked about it last time, but I lost a lot of my genetics, and so all I had was this room, and it was 2 weeks into flower, so I flipped it back into veg, and so the bottom half in here, you can see it's all like it's just starting to go into flower and stuff. But these are a handful of strains. This is Alien Fire Kush. These are the peanut butter and jelly, a couple of them. I dug a couple out. I'm actually bringing them outside. I'm just kind of getting a little weird because I don't have enough time to do all this shit. Here's the pie hoe. I mean, this is like, this is standing 9 feet tall in this little room here. Look at these lights, barely. These are all Alien Fire Kushes. I don't know. I can take a lot of tops off that. I could probably take 2,000 cuts out of here easy. All apicals. There's a Candyland back in there that I got from. This is a jungle, dude. I'm going in. There's a Candyland back in here. Everything's really healthy. I've just kind of let it go. So there's the tops of them. They're all V'd and nice ridges, and get a little heat stress being close to those lights. No bugs. A bunch of sage back in here. But I moved all my fish outside, so I took away. This was a kind of aquaponic no-till bed, and I had to move the fish outside, and so all the catfish are outside, and it's just a no-till bed. Not too exciting. There's my Carolina Reaper. This is like 4 years old, and it needs some needs to be cloned and moved. But I sifted it out of 200 plants, because this is the one I picked. What else? Got my lights out here. It's dark. Actually, I'm gonna have to do this for a sec till I get in into the secured facility.
Dun dun dun. I'm just kidding. Looks like we lost a couple people. I just want to shout out to Brain Grow and Marty. Marty's Patreon is AP Meds, and his YouTube channel is AP Meds, since he had to take off. And Brain Grow is BRAYNGRO or _GRO at YouTube. You can check his content out. Thanks again to Chris Trump for coming on the show as well. There we go.
Josh, here's these ladies. You guys saw these last week, so they're, coming along.
They'd be growing.
They're growing. It kind of got cooler for a couple days there, but yeah. And then I got some lights hung up to hold these in veg. They'll go off here in an hour or so. So I decided after our off-air conversation, I decided to have them run from, or extend the light till 10 p.m. and then turn on again at 2 a.m. so they get a handful of hours of darkness. And then when we get to the second week of July, then I'm gonna just pull the plug, and it should rock on real hard. But everything's jamming in the greenhouse. Holy shit.
That's pretty cool looking there, Bubba.
Yeah, it's pretty fun at night to see.
Yeah, I could hang out there for a while.
Yep. Yeah. I'd like to have this whole thing rode out with all those plants.
That's gonna be massive.
It though. Yeah. I can't really. I'd like to just wish I could just plant in the soil, but it's too compacted. It wouldn't be worth it. But yeah, the plants in the greenhouse a lot of them are really just starting to come back. They were all shocked, and now they're all starting to be up and green up, and
oh yeah, they've jumped a little from last week.
Yeah, you can see the whole thing.
Well, last week it looked like some of it wasn't something there.
Yeah,
and now this week it looks like there's something everywhere.
Yeah. See, they're all greening up. This side over here is kind of still behind. It's wetter on that side. That's why. So it's the bed's drying up. I didn't design a good enough drainage system, so before I get to next winter, I gotta do something about that.
Yep.
But yeah, these Paiho, man, I gotta get these things flowering. They're already, they're almost up to my chin, and I'm 6 feet tall. So I don't know. I don't have light depth, so I don't know. I might be out here with the weed whacker. But yeah,
wow.
I'm stoked.
Yeah, they've grown a lot since last week.
And all I've done is yesterday yesterday early morning, I sprayed them with the fulvic acid.
So do you have any of those CBD plants that guy gave out in the 6-packs?
Yeah, those are outside. They
Yeah,
they got
I'd love
stunted
to see
and they
this.
just turned around too. See,
Yeah,
you're like, these ones are like all shitty, but this whole row was like that, and you can see like they're just taking off, you know.
yeah. Sometimes, you know what's funny? The biggest plants I've ever grown, I put out almost the last week of July, and they ended up being 13, almost 14 feet tall.
Yeah. We all get so excited, or I get so excited and jump the season every fucking time, and I just suffer from slowing everything down. It'd be almost better just to plant seeds in the ground, you know. Second week of May. Let's see, where are those? Here's a little one. They're not jamming, but they were all, see, they're just starting to come back. You know, they were not doing so good being out here this early. But
So,
I just, with the
there's
stuff
a good
outside, I
question.
just let them go. You know what I mean?
There's a good question. Where you're at, what week do you put plants out?
Well, I probably should have waited a couple weeks. See, this one's starting to move too. But to be honest, by the time I got these, they had thrips on them. And so I just kept them up on my porch. And I was like, well, good luck, you know. And then they just kept being all right on my porch. So I was like, all right, I guess I'll plant you, you know. But the typical, like, you know, recommendation is the second or third week of May. So I'm jumped the gun here on all these guys. These are Ponics.
I always went third week of May. I was just kind of curious as to what your personal.
I'm a risk taker, so I always like getting plants going, and then I kind of, when I feel like we've hit the hump, gotten over the hump of freezing or whatever, or something I can manage, then I'll start moving plants out.
Yeah.
These are a bunch more Ponics. These are the Sin Mint cookies, which I was reading about, and I think they're going to do real good outdoors. I got to get in here and cut this grass and get some straw down.
That's some healthy grass, man.
Yeah. So I built these beds brand new last year. Yeah. I think they'll do a lot better this year. I don't know. That's it for me.
Good deal. Hips out.
What about you, Mr. Green Jeans?
I don't have not much going over here.
Just the
usual.
I just got.
All right, sorry.
Yeah.
Ducks are great for getting rid of pests, man. They use them in wine vineyards. Keep them around your greenhouses. They eat all the bugs before they get to your plants.
The slugs, that's what they're here for.
Oh, yeah. Great slug eaters. What about you, Roger?
I'm just hanging around. I'm just behind on everything, basically. You know, behind on the farm, behind on the forum, behind on the websites. You know, I'm just trying to pick away every day. I went and crushed a bunch of beer cans today. You know, I got a complaint. So instead of doing something a little more constructive, I had to do something in order to fill somebody else's expectations. But I'm doing great, kind of. Yeah, not a lot going on, just everything. just transplanted my seedlings that we were talking about in the little cups last week because I had to. I'm not going to be able to move them soon enough, so I put them in little 6-inch pots. So I'm doing the the ultimate transplanting grow this time, I guess. We went from our Rockwell cube to our solo cups, and now we're in our 6-inch cups. So I let them get a little bit bigger. And they were only about half root bound, so that was kind of cool. I thought they would be a little bit more, but because they're doing really well. But no, I just noticed all my blue dream and Strawberry Kush clones are all rooted now. I just noticed the first spurt of growth. That is the key to saying, yep, they're rooted, because that plant wasn't that big yesterday. So I'm happy about that, So, and I guess my moms are gonna have to take some take the tops off a little bit, make some clones off the top of them, and throw them in the veg room. Now that I know the other ones are rooted, And I'm happy to report. Well, I was listening to Chris earlier. I got jonesing and went back and found one of the bags of stuff I was going to make medicine cocoa oil out of, and I think it's the remnants of all the little calyxes and small buds off the Blue Dream, and I got a nice little buzz during the show. So I'm feeling a lot better than I was when I started off the show with half of a leaf joint, left over. I might make it, to another week, So. But anyway, that's it. Nothing, same old shit, different day, as we say. I really enjoyed Chris Trump, and the best thing, hanging out with you guys last year. By the way, we didn't talk about it because we had such great guests that night, but 420 was my 1-year anniversary on the show, so I wanted to bring that up and say, I really enjoyed it. And during that year, I got to sit here tonight with Chris Trump, and I understood most of what he was talking about, pretty much. Thanks to Josh. If Josh is still listening, I mean, if he's there, he took his picture. But Josh, I actually knew what the IMO stuff was because Josh and I talked about that last week after the show. So that was really cool that I learned something last week from Josh that tonight was talked about. I'm like, I understand what the hell's going on. It was great information. Almost anybody can understand that stuff. I mean, I like the way he did analogies to stuff.
We don't just make this shit up.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We just got a big conspiracy going on. It's pretty cool, though. I really enjoyed tonight, and he was great. He was great. I wish I had the money and the time to get up to Idaho and take that class, because I'd love to be a certified teacher of the. I bet that'd go over real good around here, man. We got over here on the East Coast. I'll tell you what, Carolina. We got that would go over real good. I think you could sell classes, like you could do as many weekends as you want if you got that certification. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, just the time I want to go. It's actually not too far from where I live, and it's really affordable too. I can't remember what his exact price was, but
he didn't mention. Well, I like to ask sometimes because most people don't ever say a price, but I like to ask.
It's under $500.
See, that's not bad for 5 days.
Yeah,
that's pretty cheap for 5 days.
It might have been like 300 something. I don't quote me on it, but
and the hotel room should be a little cheaper in Idaho than LA or
yeah
San Francisco.
Boise's a pretty hopping town, though.
No, I love it up there. I rode up horseback there one time, and got to hang out. It's a farmland, but yeah, Boise's a city, a pretty big city. Yeah. No doubt about it.
They do not like weed right. There, though.
It'll be expensive. I like to go, though, but, nothing. Anyway,
yeah,
everybody
I think Faust is going to go, and I think Chip Osborne, which we should get Chip on here, Steve. Chip would be awesome. He was at one of the conferences we did this winter, but he's like a soil chemistry guy, and he works big on managing big turf, like baseball fields, amusement parks, all organically.
Wow. See, I know a guy like that here, but it's all chemical fertilizer. He makes the fertilizer for a chemical company, and he does a lot of golf courses and stuff like that. So,
See, I think that Chip
organic
used
would
to
be cool.
do that back in the day, and then he switched over. And once he learned about the soil, organic and the soil food web, and it's been a long time since he's done that, but he's quite the expert. He breaks it down.
That was one of my favorite things about having Cowboy, or we affectionately call him Cowboy. I forget what his first and last name was. Joe. He probably doesn't want me to say his first and last name, but we'll affectionately call him Cowboy. And it was just awesome to see how someone who is, is red-blooded Republican and the opposite of what you traditionally think is someone that would listen to our kind of culture or our kind of gardening methods, and to have this guy taking notes the whole time. And it's so great to see how organic gardening can really bridge culture gaps and really bring, people of all walks of life together. And I really wanted to just again touch on this specific show, especially because of how what Chris is doing is now being applied to a lot of cattle ranchers and stuff, slowly but surely, and it really has a chance to really change how America farms as a whole. And he was the first guy to take it and apply it to more than 100 acres. Again, the first guy, he told you himself, was the biggest one, was 34 acres. He is running 800 acres.
Yeah.
To give you an idea of scale. So this is something that can run at any size farm. It doesn't matter if you're large, small, or something in between.
So did you ever, Brain Grow was asking about that there was some chat questions that they wanted to ask. Was there anything there? Was he just asking? Did he? I didn't know if he saw it. Didn't want to neglect our followers if we're.
No. There was a question about does Chris have a book? He does not have a book currently. No.
Okay, so it wasn't prevalent to interrupt Chris while he was teaching.
No, he has really good how-to videos on his YouTube channel.
Yeah, I can
if you're looking for more about any of the things he talked about, he has one of the how-to videos on one of the brews is like 45 minutes long. Like, he does a very good, thorough job of explaining to you how to do things in brutal detail in a very clear and easy to understand way. And if you're looking for more information on it, highly, highly, highly suggest checking out his YouTube channel. It's Chris Trump. And just quick YouTube channel, Google him, and you'll get it.
And you know what I love? That he gave us we finally have the answer for the people about molasses. Why and how and when and what type to be able to use, and that was thank you for that question, Steve. That was a kick-ass question right there, because I have that argument about 50 times a year with people. So that's now I've got somebody that they can't really dispute what his information is. I think that goes without saying.
He's the guy doing it on a bigger scale than anyone else.
Yeah.
So kind of the authority, at least in that particular field, is, in my opinion, at least.
But top 3 in the U.S., as he says.
What's amazing is that taking those same applications and applying them to aquaponics, it makes a world of difference. Even just the lactobacillus ferments to aquaponics not only will make your fish grow faster, but your plants grow faster. So
I've been another good thing. Oh, go ahead.
So I've been up to a couple of stuff. I've been hanging out and doing some. Decided to get some competition level seeds, and we're growing some. We're going to do a whole video series on a competition level pumpkin that we're going to be growing for the Half Moon Bay pumpkin contest. So I got some decent seeds now for that. So we're going to try and enter it in. They have a pumpkin contest annually. So we're going to grow one aquaponically and see if we can't grow a bigger one than them soil growers. There's no rules against it as far as we can tell on the rules. So we're gonna throw down and see if we can enter in as the farm and see if we can't produce one that's even bigger, and we'll see what happens. Maybe I'll fall flat on my face, maybe we won't, but I'm thinking if we do a dual root zone pumpkin, we can really grow one in maybe a trash can instead of a normal pot. We can come up with something that'll really crank it out. I don't know about you. What do you guys think?
I think
65 gallon smart pot, dual root zone. I've grown plenty of squash in my aquaponics that did just fine, but I did tomatoes and stuff, and You know,
That's going to be cool to see, though. I can't
I
wait.
think you should do a huge pot though, because then you can get a
Yeah.
serious fungal network.
So here's the seeds. In fact,
Because you
here you
want
go.
plenty of soil, right? For the
We're going to start the series off this week. These came from a 2,000-pound pumpkin.
Atlantic Giant is the variety, right?
Yep,
It's Howard Dill.
See the breeds and stuff on there.
Yeah, Howard Dill from Nova Scotia.
So these ones came from Missouri, from some kind of some place there. But I figured it'd be fun to take something that has good genetics and throw it in an aquaponics system and see, if I thin it down to one or two pumpkin, just one pumpkin, what is how does it stack up? There's a lot of documentation for how the soil guys do it. They've been doing this for years and years and years. What happens if I take their genetics and throw it in? No one's actually done a high-end competition level fruiting crop in aquaponics. So we're going to be growing that at the Ouroboros Farms in Half Moon Bay. We're going to be doing a video series on that, and we're extremely excited to do that because most aquaponic farms are very focused on lettuce. So it'd be kind of neat to see how this works out. Obviously, we have other things going on, but we thought it'd be kind of a fun side project.
I think a lot of those giant squash and giant pumpkins are grown pretty far north in northern latitudes. Maybe it might be a good idea to supplement with lighting, like where you guys are, to increase the length of the day, like a couple of hours or something in the middle of the summer. I don't know.
Could be arranged.
Like put them right over the vines directly,
Coil the
Brendan.
nice circles each light, right? Like have it like a spiral and then go over and have another spiral.
It's time to call Brendan. Get Brendan in on the process.
We'll get Brendan in and we'll design these nice, neat grids, and In fact, I just saw Brendan.
It's a contest. You're going out here to win.
They'll be back on the show. Brendan and Orr will be back on the show here in the next month or two.
All right.
Next week we're gonna have Brett from the dude from Dude Grows. A handful of you know his real name, and we'll have we might also have depending on his schedule, Grow Guru as well, and then we're going to have Marty has a guest from. Hold on a second. Shout out to Marty. Big thank you for helping get some guests on the show. A gentleman from NWGA Hemp. They run a really cool hemp operation, and Marty is familiar with them. They do a bunch of geothermal stuff and a bunch of other cool organic production stuff, and a real good sustainable company. So Marty's been working on helping get them on the show. So thank you again to Marty for doing that and taking the effort to reach out and bring some viewers on. Again, if any is a fan of the show and you know someone that we'd love to get interviewed on here and have them share their knowledge, please reach out. Feel free to email me at potentponics@gmail.com. We also have our first CBD dinner at the Ouroboros Farms, where we'll be doing a farm-to-table CBD-infused dinner on June 23rd. Information is available on the website. We will have the schedule available for the rest of the herb, cannabis, and other classes here in the next week or so on the website. It's all done, and we just got to make it live. There's having a last-minute website issue at the moment. So I'm just trying to think if there's anything else going on. Working on a couple of other cool things can't talk about right now, and right now just in licensing hell, waiting on licensing. Some filed, some not filed, some awaiting review by city councils, some awaiting review by different governments. It's sick and tired of waiting for paperwork and sick and tired of filling out forms and paperwork for stuff, but that's where we're at with our cannabis stuff. But that's been fun, but you know how that is.
Business.
The hardest part of a cannabis business is actually getting the ability to operate. But that's how things go. Again, thanks everyone for listening. Oh, I wanted a quick mention. So I got us. We are now on tunein.com. We are also now on iHeartRadio.com. We are also on SoundCloud.com, iTunes.com, a whole bunch of other ones, Stitcher, Speaker.com. I got us all set up for everything. So if you're interested in listening to us in some other format, everything within a day or two I'm re-uploading, and the full back catalog is now available for anyone that's interested in listening. I think I got every single episode. I'll double check today, but I think I found all the ones that didn't properly upload and rectified the situation this week over the last couple of days. So if you do find one that is not uploaded numerically, let me know. Also, there is no episode 7. When we do episode 99, I think maybe we'll do a hidden or mystery episode with a very special guest that has been meaning to join us for a long time, who will remain nameless at the moment, that I've been speaking with. So when we get to that point here, maybe in 10 or so episodes, I have someone very cool lined up for everyone, assuming we can line it up schedule-wise. So again, no shortage of cool people we've had on the show, but
more to come.
Indeed. And thank you for everyone and the community that has been help building up this show. We hit 3,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel this week. YouTube, obviously, we have who knows how long we'll be live on there. I've been in the process of backing up the rest of the channel to the WeedTube. I am awaiting the application process for DTube right now, so we can get on there as well. I'm trying to find a couple of other platforms. I will, in the next week or two, also back everything up to Vimeo, so we have everything backed up to all platforms, at least all the ones that make sense to back it up to. But again, it all is available in all audio formats now. As far as I'm aware, if there's anything you'd like me to upload it to that is not currently on, please let me know, and I will do my best to figure it out. I think I figured out why it wasn't working in the past. There was a glitch that was going on with the original uploader on the RSS feed that was basically preventing it from, the RSS feed was working, but it wasn't feeding out to all the places that would actually load it into the sites and allow you to download it. We fixed that problem. So if you have any issues, please let me know. Or if there's a platform you use that we are not currently on, please let me know, and I will do my best to get it uploaded to there. Thank you, everyone, and I appreciate it. Thank you for everyone for your patience on us doing that. And again, we don't know how long we're going to be on YouTube. If YouTube goes down, we will switch to either Vimeo or we will switch to Twitch. I do have the capability of streaming everything from there, just the way that we do on here, in the event that YouTube decides to be a super asshole. So that is our backup plan, but that's not a problem. I used to live stream video games all the time. I can replicate the show. Actually, the quality of the show will go up because I can actually do more formatting with how the video works. So in the event that that happens, we will just switch platforms. The show will not end, and everything has been backed up in multiple ways. So we will not lose our content should the worst happen and YouTube decide to kill the channel. So it took me days and days and days and days and days of work, because we have over 200 hours just on the podcast. This podcast alone, we have 70 hours with the other podcast, and I forget how many hours just of other content. So it was a lot of downloading and uploading and downloading and uploading and downloading and uploading. So, but it's a labor of love. We spend a lot of time working on this, and I appreciate the community. So I want to make sure that we don't lose this knowledge, because, you know, it'd be a shame. And I've seen how Crazy Dago lost his, Growers Roundtable. It's just, that's horrible that they lost that. And a lot of other big name YouTubers have lost their channels, and that really fucking sucks. That's a whole amount of knowledge that, no one's going to have that conversation the same way again with those people that were there, that were invited on that episode. Think about all the incredible conversations we've had here, and all the different panelists we've had, and the amalgamation of panelists that have led to some incredible conversations. You can't recreate that organically, so I want to make sure that everything's backed up immediately, so that there's no chance, even if YouTube goes crazy, that everything will be archived. So
okay then.
all right, sorry about that, a little bit of a rant, but I just wanted to let you guys know that I've spent many an hour in the last month or so backing up everything.
Good news. Good to hear.
So anyways, thanks for everyone for watching. Thanks again to Chris Trump for coming on the show, and all the other panelists that had to duck out a little early. And we'll be back again next week with the guys from the Dude Grows. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you guys next time. Cheers.
Happy growing.
Bye.